Welcome to the Oakville Harbour West Shore Redevelopment Phase 4 Shipyard Park Virtual Public Meeting. Oakville as we know it today is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron and the Haudenosaunee, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in First Nations history. As we gather today on the sacred lands of Treaty 14 and 22, we are in solidarity with Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect Mother Earth, the original nations of the trees and plants, the four-legged, the flyers, the finned, and the crawlers as the original stewards of Mother Earth. We acknowledge and give gratitude to the waters as being life and being sacred, and to the carriers of those water teachings, the females. We acknowledge and give gratitude for the wisdom of the grandfathers and the four winds that carry the spirits of our ancestors that walk this land before us. The town of Oakville is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the treaty holders, for being stewards of this traditional territory. This virtual meeting is a narrated presentation. For your convenience, the slides will advance automatically. You can pause or replay the presentation at any time using your media player controls. This presentation is approximately 15 minutes long. This presentation includes an introduction to the project, an outline of the project timeline, a summary of the proposed work, a description of how the project will be implemented, and a review of next steps. If you have questions or comments related to this presentation, please send an email to oakvilleharbor-ph4@oakville.ca. Okay, let's begin. In 2007, the town of Oakville identified that Oakville Harbour's West Shore area shorelines and park spaces were in need of rehabilitation. A master plan was developed together with stakeholders and residents that was approved by Council in 2009. The master plan covered a large portion of the waterfront area and included recommendations for Tannery Park, Shipyard Park, Oyster Bay, Shoreline Promenade, Walker Street Promenade, and Waterworks Park. The master plan established key objectives that would be used to guide improvements to the West Shore parks. These objectives focused on maximizing public access along the Lake Ontario and 16 Mile Creek shorelines, rehabilitating park areas to meet current accessibility and safety standards, reinvigorating and beautifying the park landscapes, improving long-term sustainability of the shoreline and near-shore park spaces, and reducing conflicts between park visitors and active harbor uses. Since the approval of the master plan in 2009, the town has been busy planning and organizing site improvements. This timeline chart illustrates the many site improvement initiatives that have occurred. Please make note of the timing of the implementation of Phase 1, completion of the Oyster Bay area, Phase 2, completion of the Tannery Hill Observatory deck, and Phase 3, the Lake Ontario Shoreline Works, Shoreline Promenade, Walker Street Promenade, and Waterworks Park. Phase 4 of the master plan implementation is focused on the redevelopment of Shipyard Park, which is the final phase. The detailed design of Shipyard Park is currently underway, and construction is expected to commence in fall of 2025 and continue into 2026. The next part of this presentation will describe the improvements that are proposed for Shipyard Park. Shipyard Park is an approximately 2-hectare park situated next to 16 Mile Creek just south of Lakeshore Road. The park is an intensely used area of Oakville's waterfront, and as expected, the area is well worn and is in need of rehabilitation. The park is an active harbor that accommodates both public and private uses. Private uses include the Oakville Yacht Squadron, otherwise known as OYS. There are current harbor functions that will need to be accommodated in the park in the future. An example of these include public and private parking, boat docking, boat launching and trailer parking, seasonal boat storage, and activities related to the Oakville Yacht Squadron, such as boat servicing and the sailing school. This slide shows an aerial of Shipyard Park in its current condition. We will quickly point out some of the main features of the site. However, please feel free to pause the presentation at any time so you can review the plan in more detail. Shipyard Park generally has two distinct areas that are divided by Francis Street. The southeast area is occupied by the OIS main building and surrounding parking and operations areas. Directly south of this area is the connection point to the Phase 1 walkway at Oyster Bay. To the north of the OIS building is the recently constructed boat launch facility, which is to remain as is. Please note the location of the Francis Street access drive, which is the only vehicle access and fire route into Shipyard Park. Some improvements to Shipyard Park have recently been completed. In 2016, the existing boat launch was reconstructed, and in 2024, a portion of the existing seawall was replaced along with some minor improvements to adjacent areas. The town is now ready to proceed with the remaining rehabilitation works, which will include renovation of the Francis Street access drive, renovation of the existing parking areas, south seawall replacement, extension of public access along the water's edge, boardwalk replacement, inclusion of a new seating and gathering area, improved lighting, and general landscape improvements. This slide shows a rendering of the proposed works for Shipyard Park. We will quickly point out some of the main features of the proposed work. However, please feel free to pause the presentation at any time so you can review the plan in more detail. As noted, the scope of work proposed for Shipyard Park includes grading and accessibility improvements to Francis Street, repaving and regrading of the parking areas around the OIS main building, paving of the main access drive and inclusion of additional parking, implementation of continuous public access along the water's edge of the park from the Lakeshore Road Bridge to the Phase 1 connection, inclusion of a new seating and gathering area, and slope improvements. Improvements to Francis Street are key to ensuring the long-term sustainability of Shipyard Park and the harbor functions that currently exist. Francis Street is the only vehicle access and fire route into Shipyard Park. Improvements are needed to address safety and accessibility concerns related to the steep grades and the lack of a pedestrian sidewalk. Key improvements for Francis Street include regrading to reduce longitudinal slopes, revised geometry at the Forsyth Street intersection, inclusion of a pedestrian sidewalk, slope stability improvements, and the creation of a park gateway sign. Improvements to the Forsyth Street intersection will address geometry and safety issues related to turning functions and grades, as well as providing a much-needed sidewalk and crosswalk. The new sidewalk will connect to the sidewalk on Lakeshore Road. These improvements will also provide an opportunity to incorporate a gateway feature to the park, which currently does not exist. This slide shows enlargements of the intersection of Francis and Forsyth Streets, as well as a detail of the proposed gateway feature. Please feel free to pause the presentation at any time so you can review the graphics in more detail. Seawall improvements are proposed as part of the Phase 4 works. High water levels in 2017 and 2019 negatively impacted OIS operations. A new cap is being constructed on top of the south seawall to raise the height to elevation 76.1 meters. The raised crest height will lower the potential for backshore flooding in the future. The area between the seawall and the OIS building will be regraded and will provide a continuous public access connection to the existing Phase 1 area. A new seating and gathering area is proposed to be constructed as part of the Phase 4 redevelopment work. The town of Oakville, along with the Canadian Caribbean Association of Halton, the town of Oakville Museum, an expert archaeologist historian, and a team of landscape architects, engineers, and metal fabricators, came together and explored the idea of designing a commemorative feature that would focus on Oakville as a major port of entry for the Underground Railroad. Thousands of enslaved African Americans followed the North Star's light on their quest for freedom. The North Star symbolizes the role of Oakville Harbour as a gateway and terminus for the Underground Railroad. The points radiating from the North Star symbolize the fact that men, women, and children of African descent actually came to Oakville from all 4 points of the compass. The circular seating node, oriented to the cardinal directions, is anchored by 4 circular benches and a semicircular shade canopy. Bronze inserts in the seating node paving will outline the North Star and the Big and Little Dipper constellations. This is a key component of the feature, as these constellations were used by travelers to navigate to Oakville across open water. A custom canopy will be engraved with the known surnames of the people and families that traveled over water in their quest for freedom. The seating node will include lighting, interpretive panels, and a nearby picnic area. Detailed design of this feature is currently underway. A digital 3D model has been prepared in both daytime and nighttime conditions. Renderings can be provided upon request. Please feel free to pause the presentation to review this plan in more detail. Due to the complexity of how the site functions, construction is proposed to occur in 2 phases over a 2-year period. Phase 1 is to include parking lot reconstruction, underground servicing such as stormwater management and water service, asphalt parking lot paving, concrete sidewalk paving, retaining walls, parking lot lighting and boat pedestals, the South Seawall works, and the boardwalk reconstruction. Phase 2A is to include the initial Francis Street road improvements, the Francis Street-Forsyth Street intersection improvements, underground servicing, asphalt parking lot paving, concrete sidewalk paving, retaining walls, parking lot lighting and boat pedestals, and grading improvements. Phase 2B is to include the remaining Francis Street road improvements, soft landscaping works, tree replanting, site furnishing installation, construction of the underground railroad feature, signage, top coating of all asphalt areas, and line painting. So what is happening next? Comments from the community from this engagement event will be collected and considered as the detailed design progresses. Construction drawings will be finalized, required permits will be obtained, and the contractor pre-qualification process will be concluded. The project is anticipated to be ready for tender in early 2025, with a construction start date of Phase 1 in the fall of 2025. Construction start date of Phase 2 is expected for early 2026. Both phases are to be complete at the end of 2026. Please note, access to the park, parking, and the launch ramp will be open for limited uses and may be closed at times due to construction sequencing. This is the end of the presentation. To submit your questions or comments, please send an email to oakvilleharbor-ph4@oakville.ca. Thank you for watching this virtual public meeting.